Welcome back to 20 Side Adventures. My name's Ryan. This is Swashbuckler 401, where I take you through some of my favorite archetypes to pair with the Swashbuckler, predominantly in a free archetype style of play. However, there are a couple I will bring up that I think might just be good dips that have some value as a Swashbuckler, that if you want a little bit more robust play. I generally don't go into class archetypes, mainly because I'm covering all of the classes and talking about the archetype is maybe a little dull. I will, however, give notable mentions if some have just some very obviously good synergies in these videos altogether. If you're not a fan of free archetype, that's a shame. I think it's a wonderful way to play, mainly because it gives you just the most amount of character creation to build the character that you truly have in your mind. And for me, it is all about creating those unique characters. As always, if you like what we're doing here on the channel, please leave a like and subscribe down below. Very much appreciated. And again, easiest way to support the channel, leave a comment. Let's chat about swashbucklers. With no further ado, let's get into Swashbuckler 401. So we're going to just jump right in here on the Archives of Nethys. The first two are going to seem a little redundant, but they have some very unique pieces that really just lean into the Swashbuckler. So the first is the Aldori Duelist. The dedication itself is mainly just giving you access to the Aldori Dueling Sword, though you do get a free training athletics since you're getting acrobatics from your class. You also gain the additional lore feat for dueling lore, so dueling lore is just always going to level up with you. And you get access to this skill feat, Dueling Acumen, which can be a level 2 skill feat, so it's really easy to dip in and out of this, so if you are using it outside of a free archetype setting. But this lets you use dueling lore for initiative when you're in duels, and then a couple other things that lean into the specifically dueling subset rules in Pathfinder. Check those out if you're interested. Then you have a lot of feats that are really reminiscent to what a Swashbuckler normally has, so you can get the parry or the initiative bonus, maybe, and free up some Swashbuckler slots. But at 10, you get this really interesting saving slash, which is a reaction. You make a DC 15 flat check, and if you succeed, the critical hit becomes a normal hit instead, which is pretty impressive. One-on-one is a fantastic action compression where you're going to be getting a feint and a strike for the price of a single action. So that one is fantastic. You can only do it once per round though, so you can't keep feinting and hitting other targets. Aldori Retort's going to give you another reaction, which if you take the Swashbuckler one, you're just going to be piling up lots of reaction on this build. Duelist form is going to give you a quickened condition like most classes get. You're going to get it a little early than they do in a lot of cases. You can either use it to step or for any single action that you learn from the Aldori dueling archetype, which is pretty impressive, especially when you consider that one-on-one, so you get a quickened action to do a feint and an attack. That can be really powerful. Tempo Duelist lets you be concealed 1 as you move, so a little bit of concealment never hurts. Devastating Duelist. You essentially get to make a fear attempt on a successful strike with the Aldori Dueling Sword using your dueling lore instead of your intimidation, which that's going to be a little rough because that's going to be intelligence. You probably haven't spent a lot of points on intelligence, but nonetheless, it is a free option for Frighten 2. And then at 20, you can either become a Sword Lord or a Sword Lord in Exile, which if you're a Sword Lord, you're going to gain temporary hit points every time you hit someone, or 10 temporary hit points if you critically hit them. These last for 1 round. Or if you're a Sword Lord in Exile, going to deal 5 precision damage. It is worth noting, you can substitute dueling lore in place of different activities for both of these. Again, while you are getting the free level ups with it, I just don't think most builds are going to have the stats to really back up replacing dueling lore, but maybe you can lean into and build specifically for that and being an Aldori Sword Lord. Now the Duelist is very similar, that it's going to have a lot of feats that overlap with the Swashbuckler, but it also has some great synergies. The dedication is going to give you a quick draw, kind of neat, but not super impressive. At 4, you have the option for Duelist Challenge, where you can issue a challenge and you get a bonus on damage against your target, but you will take penalties if you attack someone other than your target. So a nice way to just pad your damage. Watch This is kind of a weird one, but a lot of fun also. If your ally misses or critically misses a target, you call out how you're gonna do what they failed to do. And if you succeed, you're gonna get some extra damage. Really, it's twice the number of damage die. So it could be a really good way to capitalize on someone crit fishing on their -5 or -10 multiple attack penalty you pop this reaction, you possibly double your dice next turn on an attack. If you really like disarming, there is a stance the duelist can get, the disarming stance. You get a +1 bonus to attempts to disarm and a +2 bonus to not being disarmed yourself. Selfless parry. Now this one's kind of interesting that it happens before you can get dueling riposte, but essentially you get a +1 bonus to any of your allies that are around you, so you get a little aura of protecting them. And then once you pick up dueling riposte, you can then, when your allies take a critical miss, you can use your strike to riposte against them. I have, at my table, ruled that the Swashbuckler's riposte meets this criteria, so we don't need to pick up this level 10 feat of dueling riposte, but that is a decision at the table to be made, whether you really need to pick up dueling riposte to use that extra feat, since it specifically says dueling riposte, versus the Swashbuckler's riposte. Disarming Twist at 12. It's a single action that gets a normal attack for damage, but has the rider that you get a success or a critical success of a disarm action. So it's really a free disarm or an attacking disarm. Do be aware this has the press trait, so you cannot open with this. It has to be your second attack, which if you are a Swashbuckler and you are wanting to use finishers, you'll have to do a normal attack. You'll have to then do your disarming twist, and then you'll have to do a finisher at your maximum multiple attack penalty, as well as it has some pretty cool conditions that if you fail, they become off guard, so you're giving free off guard to your allies, and then you also get a +1 bonus on the attack roll if you have disarming stance, so this could be a good synergy going down that route. Student of the Dueling Arts. This one's really neat if you have a couple feats in here and you just didn't have room for it, or if you're not doing a free archetype game, it gives you more flexibility. Essentially, at the beginning of each day, you can swap in and out your duelist feats. And it has a really interesting rider that you can enter any of the stances from this archetype without having the feat. It just takes 2 actions instead of 1. So if you're really feat hungry and you need more options, but you still like the stances, you get access to all of them. Dueling Dance gives you the benefits of dueling parry at all times. 14, you can gain another reaction for dueling riposte. This one I probably wouldn't allow at my table, combined with the other Swashbuckler one. Maybe we would, I probably wouldn't let them take both if I was doing free archetype. And then Guiding Riposte, by shifting your weight and angling your weapon, you guide your opponent to a more favorable position. When you use Dueling Riposte to strike and you hit, you can reposition up to 10 feet. Again, I would probably let that work with the Swashbuckler Riposte. And so those are the ones that I think are just the easiest to synergize, where there is a lot of overlap, so you do have to be very careful with it, but I also think these could make really good dips if you are not using free archetype. Butterfly Blade is another interesting one. Most of these are going to be highlighted because you're using weapons that meet the other criteria for being a swashbuckler, but you became trained in deception and stealth, so you're getting even more skill options. And if you are trained in them already, you become an expert instead, so that could just be a good way to quickly advance some skills. If you like using recall knowledge, Clever Gambit gives you a reaction when you critically hit when you have done a recall knowledge on your foe. This will essentially give you a free step or stride, so you can better maneuver around the battlefield. If you're really leaning into the butterfly blades, you can turn them into non-lethal strikes without penalty, or more importantly, you can pick up the sneak attack class feature combined with all of your swashbuckler finishers for a lot of extra damage. Dread Striker has a lot of great synergies as well, especially if you are the swashbuckler that's doing a lot of demoralizing, because they also become flat-footed against your attacks, as well as having the fear condition, so you're just doubling up on the effects of your primary panache generation. Mastermind's Eye is again leaning into that recall knowledge, which if you have done that, they're now going to be off guard to your various attacks coming in, and that can go all the way up to 1 minute rather than just the next round of combat. So again, you've picked up the sneak attack, you like having people off guard for just more chance to hit with your swashbuckler, lots of synergy. Fan Dancer is another great archetype to lean into the sword dancing swashbuckler. Prerequisites, you're trained in performance, you're going to have that already from being that subclass. You automatically get a move to expert and master with this, so you're just leaning into that particular subclass of the swashbuckler. And when you make your feints, you can stride up to an additional 10 feet as part of that action, so that can be really cool for moving along the battlefield. Pedal Step at 4. You wanted to be a little sneakier, you get +1 bonuses to stealth and sneak, and you are not detectable by tremor sense, which is really powerful if you are up against things with tremor sense. Solo Dancer is another level 4 feat. You can always roll performance for initiative, which is pretty cool. And something I don't understand is creatures that act after you are off guard to you for that round, but they're acting after you, so you're never going to get to use it. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Maybe I'm just missing something there. Let me know in the comments what I'm missing. Twirl through. You can attempt to tumble through in enemy spaces and use performance instead of acrobatics. And since tumble through is generating you panache, that is pretty cool. Those are both also skill feats. So this is really something easy to dip into if you are wanting to get in and out of an archetype, or if you are not using free archetype. Fluttering Misdirection, another skill feat if you're wanting to help other people do stealthy, sneaky, thievy things around you. You basically distract your foes with your fans. Sweeping Fan Block is a reaction at 6. You have to be wielding 2 fans, 1 in each hand, and the trigger is that you are targeted by a ranged attack. You essentially gain a +2 circumstance bonus to your AC against the attack. And if it misses, you can redirect the ammunition into a nearby pocket or container where it can be retrieved and reused. Not sure why you need to be stealing ammunition, but I do kind of like the idea of, haha, I took your bullet from a gunslinger. Just kind of funny. Again, though, I'm not a huge fan of the +2 bonuses to AC, but here's another one if you are interested. Pushing Wind gives all of your allies a +5 circumstance bonus to land speed for 1 round. And you can also gain this to fly speed, and it makes difficult terrain around you. So this could be a really good way to help your allies move on the battlefield and control it that much better. This does only happen at the beginning of the fight, so it is limited use, but still could be a really good way to set the pace for the encounter. Whirling Strike is a 2 action. You attempt to tumble through using performance. On a success, you can make a strike against the enemy with the fan you were wielding at any point during your movement. And on a critical success, the enemy is off guard against this attack. Generating Panache, moving through, getting a good attack, making them off guard. Lots of great synergy with your Swashbuckler. Close Formation is going to grant you Tremor Sense as long as you have 2 fans, which can be pretty nice. There's Dizzying Spin Dance at 10, which is a 3 action. So you tumble through the opponent, strike the opponent. If the tumble through is successful, they're off guard to the next attack. So that sounds really familiar. And then you can do it to another opponent that's within your reach. And if that's successful, you can do it against another opponent. So you could do up to 3 tumble throughs with 3 strikes. So pretty good action economy there. Fluttering Distraction at 10. This is if someone is making a ranged attack against your ally within 30 feet. You essentially open and close your fans, distracting them, forcing them to make 2 rolls, taking the worst. Sweeping Fan Redirection at 10. Now, instead of holding that ammunition in your pouch, it all makes sense. You can redirect it back at a foe and make a ranged strike against the triggering target using your normal attack bonus and damage of your fans. So that's just a great way to take that ranged attack and turn it back on your foe. Dragon's Journey is a single action that is also a flourish. Your movement does not trigger attacks of opportunity as you make this move, and any allies you pass within 5 feet of can immediately use their reaction to stride, moving in the same direction. Allies must end their movement as close as possible to you or another ally who benefited from this ability, and your allies' movement doesn't trigger reaction. So what a great way to just move the entire party out of a dangerous situation or into a more advantageous situation. Peony's Flourish is a 3 action. You spin around and create a wide arching circles with your fans and manifest a mosaic of peonies that confuse your enemies. Stride twice, then attempt a performance check against the will DC of each creature you passed adjacent to. Should you critically succeed, the creature is stunned 3 and dazzled for as long as they are stunned. Now, do remember, we do have the incapacitation trait up here, so all of the results are going to be 1 worse if they are a higher level bad guy. Success, creature is stunned 1 and dazzled 1. Failure, the creature is dazzled. And critical failure, the creature is unaffected to future attempts. Starlit Sentinel, I've gone over this one before, but I just think there is some interesting synergies of making your Swashbuckler a magic girl, where you get the Starlit transformation, a nice +1 bonus to damage rolls with your weapon, and you get now a ranged attack where your sword can shoot out at your foes is pretty useful. At 4, you can pick up some interesting focus points with a little bit of healing or an attack that can help you out if things are maybe just a little bit out of range. Majestic Proclamation, nothing more swashbucklery than making a big speech in an attempt to demoralize and dazzle a bunch of foes. Blade of the Heart, there's nothing like stabbing your allies through the heart to empower your weapon, getting it some damage runes. 12, you can pick up Breath of Life. Never a bad thing if your party tends to find itself in danger quite a bit. And then you gain a fly speed equal to your land speed at 14, which as a swashbuckler, your land speed is insane. So just a fantastic way to be able to fly. The Eagle Knight has hit a lot of my videos, and the Eagle Knight is just an all-around good archetype for a martial that wants to be a little bit more of the face of the party. You're going to be leaning into diplomacy and society, as you have to be trained in each of them. You're going to get additional lore politics. You can use politics lore to make an impression, which the lore stuff may not work great because you're probably not leaning into intelligence a ton, but still just a lot of options. You get benefits to reduce debuffs on your allies. Commitment to justice as a flourish. If a target's reduced to 0 hit points, you can move in, get a bonus on damage. Commitment to liberty. If you hit the foe with this 2 action, your allies gain a free attempt to escape from them. Bolster ally, which on the swashbuckler, if it's a reflex save that's going to be taken, this could be great. One ally within 30 feet is targeted by something that's going to require a saving throw. They get to use your modifier instead of their own. Great reflex saves that you can hand out to your allies. You could pick up reactive strike, might be nice to have it. Blind fight could be useful, especially as that swashbuckler. You don't have to worry about not seeing things. Stir allies, give everyone a free step, or if you're really high in diplomacy, they can take a stride. Yeah, it could be useful. Gain resistance to mental damage and give a +2 bonus to all your allies for saves. If you're in a setting that has lots of mental damage happening, that could be pretty useful. Tactical reflexes, an extra reaction only for reactive strikes, which if you took reactive strike, that could be great just to have a reaction specifically for it. You can pick up an AoE Demoralize. If you took commitment to equality to remove some debuffs, you can now start adding some temporary hit points as well, which is pretty handy. Immediate Rebuke gives your reactive strike a little bit more options. So if one of your allies is hit, rather than someone moves, it just gives you another condition to use your reactive strike. And then Determination basically just lets you shut down an effect that is happening on you. So those are all great ways to just make a more resilient swashbuckler. The Lion Blade is another interesting one. This is trained in performance, so again, it might be leaning into being that battle dancer, but not necessarily required. You're gaining training in your choice of deception or stealth, or if you're already trained, you can become an expert instead. So maybe if you went the rascal, you're getting some benefits there. You also gain additional lore, espionage lore. This is if you're really wanting to be more of the sneaky spy kind of character that happens to be a swashbuckler. Inspiring recitation, gain a +1 bonus to a skill of your choice until the beginning of your next turn by reciting something in your mind that gives you a little boost. You can sustain this for up to 1 minute. If you're an expert in performance, that bonus is increased to +2. And if you're a master in performance, it's +3, legendary +4. So essentially just a free way to give yourself a boost to some skills at any given moment. That's pretty cool. Lost in the Crowd is going to let you move at full speed in crowds, take cover, hide, and sneak with some bonuses. Sneak Attacker is going to give you Sneak Attack, which is a great option for a swashbuckler because you're always looking for them to be off guard. Ongoing Investigation, if you're using the Investigate exploration activity, you can move at full speed. Interposing Crowd, if you're again moving through that crowded area, you don't trigger reactive strikes or any reactions really while you're in there. Again, this leans into a lot of crowd stuff, so this might be just a quick dip for a few things to get the Deception and the Sneak Attack. At 8, you can pick up a little bit of spell casting if you want, like with Suggestion, or subconscious suggestion once per day. Spy's Countermeasure is a free action. When you save against a detection, mental, or scrying effect, you can attempt to identify the magic using your espionage lore. Flickering Twirl, you use your movement and disguise to make yourself a flickering blur, gain concealment until the beginning of your next turn. Can't use it to hide, but just a good way maybe to mitigate a little bit of damage for one action. Slowing Strike is a free action that you can do once per round when you hit a target that is off guard and you are basically imposing a movement speed penalty. That could be pretty useful. If you strike while you are undetected against a creature with this 2 action that has the incapacitation trait, you get to move up to your speed out of that hidden state, make a melee strike. Then there is a fortitude save against your class DC, where if they succeed, they get stunned 1 and can't use reactions. If they fail, stunned 3. And on a critical failure, they are unconscious for 1 minute, so that could be pretty devastating. Shadow Dancer has some RP fluff on the side here that you generally need to be called from the shadows. This is a level 8 feat, so you're going to be taking this dedication quite a bit later. You are an expert in performance and a master in stealth, so this, again, I'm picking a lot of these for the dancer, I'm kind of noticing. Again, it is kind of one of my favorite thematic swashbucklers, so maybe I just have a soft spot there. Your coloring becomes gray and gloomy, your senses adjust to the darkness, and you sneak through it with ease. Gain greater dark vision and a +2 bonus to stealth when you're moving through dim light. Shadow magic, you're going to get a couple shadow spells with a focus point, which will let you jump and move through shadows, which is kind of nice, or allow you to create magical darkness, which you can see in and maybe your phones can't. Here's another way to pick up sneak attack, which just more damage on a swashbuckler. Very nice. Additional shadow magic lets you pick the other spell you didn't take earlier on, or you can pick up shadow illusion if you would rather have that focus spell. Shadow power is going to give you shadow blast as an innate occult spell you can cast once per day if you want a little bit of offensive magic. Spring from shadows is a flourish, which allows you to come from a hidden position, strike your foe, and remain hidden or undetected. Sense the Unseen is a reaction that is triggered when you fail a check to seek, which even on a failure will take them from undetected to at least hidden, and you'll know kind of where they are at. Cognitive Loop is a reaction that just happens when your turn ends, but you must currently be affected by a mental effect that you gained by failing, but not critically failing, a saving throw. This basically just lets you suppress the effect for one round. Could be useful if it's like a confusion and you need to be present for the next fight, but again, it is only good for one round. And then there is Shadow Master at 18. Gain resistance 5 to all damage except for force damage and ghost touch. And then when you make reflex saves in dim light or darkness, you roll twice and take the better, which you already get to bump your pretty much failures to successes and successes to critical successes. So just being that much better at reflex saves really does lean into the Swashbuckler. The Acrobat, this one's pretty self-explanatory, I think. You're going to be leaning into tumble through, getting lots of free bumps on your acrobatics. Show off, what is more of a Swashbuckler move than that? This is a free action and it's a flourish. And this is triggered when you succeed an acrobatic or athletics check deemed suitably challenging and meaningful by the GM. So again, just leaning into those ridiculous swashbuckler maneuvers. The success of the stunt is essentially going to give you some temporary hit points. Mockingbird's Disarm, you tumble through or tumbling strike through an enemy's space, and you can attempt to disarm using your acrobatics check instead of an athletics. So it's moving through with the tumble through, generating panache, and a free disarm attempt. That's pretty cool. Tumbling Opportunist, a free action when you are doing a tumble through. This lets you attempt a trip as you tumble through and using your acrobatics instead of athletics. Virtuosic Dancer. During the first round of combat, you take advantage of the fact that your foe isn't ready to anticipate your dance-like moves, gain a +3 bonus to your armor class against the strike, and then determine the strike's actual results. So this is if you're hit, you can be like, oh, +3 would have made a difference, so you at least know it, but again, is unfortunately only in the first round of combat. However, this does give you just a +1 circumstance bonus to rolls involving dancing. This gets boosted if you're legendary at acrobatics. So just a nice way to get a reaction that's a little more functional and a bonus to your performance checks. Quick Spring is a nice skill action that if you succeed a tumble through, you can then take a stride afterwards and just keep right on trucking. So if you got to make some distance, that could be useful. Tempo Shift is really interesting once per hour. This is a free action when you delay your action to adjust where you're going in the order. And the benefit is when you come back through, all enemies are off guard to you until your next turn, and you become quickened for the current round, which you can use only for a stride or strike. So by moving yourself in the initiative order, you're going to get off guard to everyone else in the combat, and you're going to gain quickened. That is fantastic. The Dandy is a great archetype if you are wanting to be a more social and influential character in the party. You become trained in deception and society. If you're already trained, you can get an expert instead, and you get the influence rumor activity where you can basically alter and change and adjust a rumor that's going on around town. So if you're doing a game with lots of downtime, lots of intrigue in a civilized place for a long time, the Dandy can give you a lot of benefits. Distracting Flattery is a great reaction when you are doing those social interactions in a game. If you notice someone didn't do so well on their make an impression, you can cut in with this reaction and try to save the day on that a little bit. Gossip Lore essentially lets you recall knowledge for just about anything you heard, though you are going to get the dubious knowledge aspect tacked onto it, but could be a really good way to just pick up some other information. Cutting Flattery is another interesting being face of the party kind of way of doing things where you use Coerce, which usually Coerce has some pretty immediate side effects. This one, they don't realize you are actually being mean to them till the next day, so you can quickly move someone into friendly if you've been more focused on intimidation. And this is a good way to kind of let you still do those diplomacy actions, but using your skills in Intimidate. Feeling Your Oats can be a real interesting one, especially since Will is perhaps one of your weaker stats as a swashbuckler. You essentially get to make a deception check, just telling everyone kind of how awesome you are building yourself up. and you can substitute that deception check for one will save that you'll be required to attempt within the next minute. So if you just know there's something coming up with will saves or you're going to be the target of it, you can use this, perhaps get you a save on will, which is your weakest. Fabricate Connections is an awesome skill where you can substitute deception to earn income, make an impression, request, or subsist. There is a limit to how much this works, but again, just another skill-focused way to do things that maybe you wouldn't normally be good at. Party Crasher is super niche, but when it comes up, it is the best. You have to be Master of Society, and you essentially get to get into a place that you would normally not have to gain access to, or your party would have to figure out, like, are we posing as waiters? How are we getting in? Are we breaking into this big social event for the campaign? No. Your dandy swashbuckler knows how to get you in. Statement Struck can be really good for a swashbuckler. You make your movement. All enemies within 30 feet have to make a will save against your class DC, or they're just mesmerized by the way you stride into the battle that they don't get to use their reactions. Play to the Crowd is another one of those, being the face of the party, where you get caught in a lie. You get this reaction where you get to start pulling in everyone else to make your lie more believable, and you get to re-roll the deception check with a +2 status bonus now, because so many people are like, oh yeah, that did happen, when it's complete bullshit. Tragic Lament is a hilarious one where you just take a critical hit and then you just cry out and woe is me. You're wondering how I got here, and you just make this stirring poetic speech about the suffering that you have just faced. Your opponent has to make a will save against your class DC, and they're slowed for 1 round by the guilt of how much they have harmed you. And at 20, if you have just leaned in so heavily to being the lying kind of scoundrel of the party, you can pick up Fabricate Truth and turn lies into the truth themselves. And then lastly, a good archetype for the Swashbuckler, if you want to be a really focused team player, is the Martial Dedication with their variety of auras. I've hit the Martial a few times, and I think it is a long-standing one, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but you get a variety of stances and bonuses that boost both yourself or your allies, as well as a couple activities to give temporary hit points or allow your party to take actions that they otherwise would not be able to. So dipping into a little bit of that commander. So if you want to be a really tactical swashbuckler, I think that the Martial is a great way to go. Again, I'm not going to dive into this one. I've done it several times, and I think it's a pretty common archetype. So there you guys go. Those are the archetypes I think synergize really well with a swashbuckler. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I miss your favorite archetype for a swashbuckler? I would love to hear about it. Once again, if you guys like what we're doing here on the channel, please leave a like and subscribe. It's very much appreciated. And as always, have a fantastic time on your 20-sided adventures. We'll catch you next time.